We are Mike and Jeanie, and we restore old houses. In 2021, we moved to South Carolina and bought a 120-year-old Victorian house. Follow along as we put the polish back on this Victorian masterpiece.
Welcome back to 1834 Restoration House.
Today we're going to continue working on the 1834 blanket chest. So far we've built the box, we built the top, now it's time to build the base.
Yay!
Today's program is sponsored by the generous support of our patrons. Your support helps to further our historic preservation efforts. For more information, visit patreon.com/1834 Restoration House.
This is what we were thinking of in terms of a base. What we'd like to do is make it to where the entire blanket chest sits down in the base and the base supports it. So it would have mitered corners here, and it would have feet at each corner and then another foot in mid-span to help support that. And we'll probably do some kind of a fancy decoration here, but this here is the box, and this here is the base. It's kind of a 3D view, so I hope that comes across well. Now, if you look along the edge, if you just sight down along it like this is what I was thinking in terms of construction. So here's the main rail right here, and then I'd like to put a cleat here on the inside. That cleat will give us some extra support. So the weight will bear down on the cleat, and we have a double gluing surface, one on the side, one on the bottom, and we think that'll work just fine. The way this is engineered, the floating floor at the bottom will still be able to float. I took a look through my vast stockpile of lumber, and this is what I came up with. So here's a board that I think will work well for the front and the back, and it does have a flaw, yes, but that's okay, because the look we're trying to achieve is one where you might have seen something back in, say, the 1800s or 1700s that was handcrafted. They may not have had perfect wood, and so this flaw right here actually will become a decorative element, although we will put it at the back. This one here is big enough to do 2 side rails. This one here, which is left over from our old 1834 house in New York, we can actually cut this up and make cleats out of this. This was supposed to be baseboard in the dining room up in New York, but as it turned out, it didn't work because it wasn't thick enough, as you can tell by the lack of planing here, and we actually had plenty of it, and so this was just left over. And it's a really good use of material for this project. We spent some time measuring and analyzing what we have. So this, of course, is the front and the back, and we're going to just rip this right down. That is, after we do the jointing and planing to see what we have left over. We'll rip this down in half, and then this is for the side. Now, because this board here is narrower than this board, this one will control how much we get out of here. And so we'll take 2 of those, and probably we'll be able to get rid of these 2 knots right here because of that. Now the other board, these are the cleats. We don't care so much about appearance, which means we're going to leave some of this rough sawn, which is actually pretty cool, I think. But this edge here is rough sawn, and I need to run this through the jointer and get that cleaned up because it has a bit of a wave to it.
Before we get started, we have a viewer question. Melissa Roth asks, why is it called a jointer when it doesn't seem to joint anything?
Well, that is a great question. The front panel of our blanket chest is actually 2 pieces of lumber that have been glued together. When you glue 2 pieces of wood together, you have a joint, a glue joint. And if they're precise, you can't even tell that there is a glue joint there. I know I can't see it. But here's what happens if you don't joint it. These 2 pieces right here have not been machined at all. As you can see, there's a big gap right there, and it's really uneven between the 2. There is no way possible that you can glue these 2 together and have a good glue joint. And so what the jointer does is it prepares the wood for a joint, and that's where they came up with the name jointer. I was just getting ready to set up for the next cut, and I noticed that there's a little bit of darkness showing right here between the board and this fence. Take a look. Normally when you put a flat square board on a flat square tool, you shouldn't see any gap in here whatsoever. Now I'm going to lift the opposite edge of this board up. Watch what happens. You see how that gap disappeared? I'm probably lifting up maybe 1/8 of an inch on the opposite side. That's telling me we have a problem. So let's go back to the jointer and see what's going on. I'm sorry to interrupt the flow of the work here, but I need to take care of this really quick. Now the jointer is the first stop in every shop. Its job is to make sure that your boards are flat, level, and square. And if it doesn't do the job right, it's going to affect everything downstream. Let me show you what the problem is here. This is called a mechanic's square, and it has a magnetic bottom. So I put it down on the deck, and I put it up against the backstop here. Now this backstop needs to be absolutely square, but as you can see, there's some daylight coming through here, and watch this. I shouldn't be able to do that either. So what I need to do is adjust this until it's perfectly square. Now, things do get out of calibration and they need to be rechecked and recalibrated every now and then. This paddle right here and this screw acts as a stopper, which makes this stay in calibration if you move it up against the stopper. Well, somehow in the process of moving from New York down here to South Carolina, this thing got flipped up, and so it wasn't exactly in the right spot. And so what I'm going to do is turn the screw and start making that adjustment until it starts to square up. Now every once in a while I have to reposition the square. So I have to turn the screw, push the backstop, move the square, and then repeat and do it over again and again and again. That looks pretty close right there. So I'm going to go ahead and lock that down. How did this impact us? Well, the bottom edge of the board doesn't matter because it's just running up against here, and it's going to be the same as it goes through. But what really matters is when you're doing the edge of the board, because now if that thing is not square, you're going to be like this. And that does make a difference. So even though it doesn't matter in our project, just as a matter of principle, I'm going to run them back through and clean those edges up again. So now we know that they're perfectly square. Here it is after rejointing it. You can see that the gap is now gone and everything looks good now. One side is the finished side, one side is unfinished. And that's going to be a problem because the thicknesses of these two boards are not the same. And when the miter joints come together, either the outside edge of the joint or the inside edge of the joint will be out of alignment. So I'm going to go ahead and run these through and get them planed up to the exact same thickness. I hope you guys don't mind all the detail work that goes on here, because there's a lot of head scratching and measuring that goes on behind the scenes, but I feel it's important to take you through some of that so you understand what it is we're dealing with and how we fix it. So do you guys like that level of detail? Let us know in the comments. Take a look at this board right here. You can see how wobbly that is, and the reason it's all wobbly is because this edge here has not been jointed yet. And of course, the jointed edge up against the fence is perfect. The next thing I want to do is take this board and rip it in two so that I have two pieces that are identical width. Right here I have 5 3/4 of an inch. Down here I have 5 1/2 inches. Oh, but wait a minute, how is that going to work? Because if I rip it straight down the middle, I'm going to have two boards. One will be perfect and the other will have an angle to it. Well, we don't want that. We're going to take the end that has the smallest width, and we're going to set everything up according to that. When I run through here and make the first cut, it's going to be the same width all the way down to the end. When I run through here and make the second cut, it's going to trim off more at that end than it does at this end, but the end result will be two perfectly cut boards. I have a board that's 5 1/2 inches. What I'm going to do is take a nominal size of 5 inches, and then I'm going to cut at 2 1/2, and then I'll make another cut at 2 1/2, and that will be the final size of our boards. Table saws have a calibrated marker, and when I move this to 2 1/2 inches, and I lock it down, it should be exactly 2 1/2 inches from the blade to the fence. When we do woodwork, we always cut our boards a little long because we know we're going to do some trimming. You can always take it off, but you can't put it back on again. I'll make 2 miter cuts here and here, and then I'll make a miter cut on here, and then figure out how long this one needs to be, and miter cut it at the correct length so when it goes together, that it's perfect. Now, when I get to the other side though, these boards are extra long, and so I'm going to have to miter cut them to the correct length, and then miter cut both of these to the correct length. If we do everything correctly, it should all fit perfect. Have you ever heard of Murphy's Law? Murphy's Law says that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And Murphy visits 1834 Restoration House a little bit too often sometimes. When we were cutting these boards down and putting the miters on outside, expecting to come back in here and start assembly, which we were going to show you. But as it turns out, there wasn't enough extra length on there to make the miter cuts. And so we ended up a little short. So I did a search around looking for any other wood that I could press into service, but we are all out of pine. So that led me to cedar. Well, you can't have cedar on one side and pine on the other, so we're going to go ahead and start all over. right, you guys, everything is back where we were. We have 4 perfectly cut pieces of wood here. Only now they're cedar instead of pine, which is great because you'll have a 2-tone, actually a 3-tone, because you've got cedar, eastern white pine, and southern yellow pine.
Oh, all right.
So you'll have 3 species.
I like it.
We didn't really intend for it to happen that way, but sometimes things just work out. We had talked about doing some decorative design on the legs, and the book that we got the idea from actually had some of that going on. So we grabbed the old pattern book. These things are wonderful because they have tons and tons of pictures and some really good ideas for furniture. In this one here, they've actually depicted a dresser in a bedroom, and they've shown a couple of different possible finishes and techniques that could be used. If the customer happened to like this better than this, then they could just replicate that on both sides. We drew several of these on a whiteboard, and this is what Jeanie settled on.
Yes.
You like this design the best?
Yes, I do.
So that's what we're going to do. Now, I'm going to do the layout, and then we'll take them outside and we'll cut that shape out. Well, we had a good time with this thing, and we made a mistake and had to basically scrap a bunch of stuff and start over again, but it worked, and it actually got done quicker the second time than it did the first time.
Yeah, like a lot less than even half the time.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that was great. Well, like I said, there's a lot of head scratching that goes on around here, so we took away the head scratching element and just did the job.
Yeah.
It was much easier. Anyway, it's all good. Unfortunately, we've run out of time again and we have to stop this video and do some editing, but we're so glad that you've chosen to watch this and follow along on this project. I know it's been longer than probably we expected or you guys expected, but good things are worth the time, right?
Yes, they are. Thank you for watching 1834 Restoration House.